Hi, and welcome to the Spooky Hours. My name's David Saunders, and today we're talking to Marion Goodfellow, who many of us know from the television in her work as a medium on many popular paranormal programs, including Ghost Detectives, Scream Team, and one that I like the most, Northern Ireland's Greatest Haunts. How are you, Marion?
I'm fine, thanks. Lovely to speak to you. It's a good job we're all on lockdown. You might not have got me if you hadn't been.
I think we're fortunate, if there's a word to say that, fortunate we've been able to talk to a lot of people that we wouldn't might be able to get down, because I imagine you're quite busy. You're always seems to be out and about doing something. How are you keeping yourself busy during lockdown?
I'm bored. Bored witless is the word.
Are you? Okay.
Yeah, I'm writing an autobiography, so that the time is I'm trying to get more of my book down, if you like. It's but the thing is, about lockdowns, you sort of say, well, I'll do that tomorrow, or I'll do that later, and before you know, the day's wasted. But that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to finish my book.
Oh, that's good. Well, give us a summary of that book. It's your autobiography. We normally ask people how they became, involved in the paranormal, and you as a psychic medium. You were a 3-year-old when you first discovered that you had some kind of ability. Can you tell us about that?
It was a perfectly normal, or I don't know, say normal. To me, I was doing something naughty. I'd stolen one of my mummy's knives out the kitchen. My mother had a beautiful cottage garden, but there was a big hunk of flint in the garden.
Maybe stop bouncing up and down a bit. The camera's going
sorry.
everywhere. So yeah, that's
right. There was a huge lump of flint in the garden, and I was busy sharpening my mother's best knives on the piece of flint. So this gentleman came up, and I saw the feet first. I'm 71. In them days, you didn't look anybody that was an adult above the knees. All right. So this big pair of feet came in front of me, and I quickly glanced up, and I thought it was my father. So glancing back, he said, "What are you doing, Marion?" Sort of no answer came to this, question. So he said, "Get them into your mother," which would be totally what my father would have said. So I rushed into my mother, knife in hand, and said, "Daddy said I've got to bring," or Dad, not Daddy, we weren't posh. Dad said, "I've got to bring these to you." And she said, she was just quizzical. "What do you mean? Your father's at work. Who was this, in the garden?" So I said, "It was my dad. It was my dad. He was in his pajamas, his pink pajamas. Pink pajamas. My father was 6'4". I said, with lots of buttons. And apparently my mother then told me later on, much later on in my life, that it was my grandfather, and that he died in a pair of red, which had washed out long johns.
Yeah.
And he had obviously found them very comfortable, so he decided to visit me in his long johns, so to speak. So that's how it all started. My mother said, "My father's at work." I said, "No, I've seen my father." She said, "No, it sounds very much like you've seen your grandfather, who had died 8 years before I was born." So that's how it all started. It's seemingly quite natural. Do you understand what I mean?
You just saw some bloke and you thought it was your dad.
Yeah, absolutely. Mum used to repeatedly repeat this story to anybody that would want to listen. "Oh, she saw Granddad in the garden," that sort of thing. And that's how it all started.
Did any other members of your family have the ability?
All of my family have some type of ability, foresight, but I'm the only one that, if you like, utilizes it. I'm the only one that uses it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So when did you start using it then? You saw your granddad, but then you grew up and
I'm growing up. The next person I saw was my grandmother. She came to visit us, and apparently had dropped into a coma. And I saw her at the bottom of my bed, and she came forward and she went, shh, shh. Didn't say anything to me, just looked at me. And then I would say disappeared, but she didn't. She walked out of the door of the bedroom, and I was up and after her because she was my very favourite person on the planet. Couldn't find her anywhere. So went into my parents' bedroom, which was, no-go area. That was the only place in the house that was. You don't go in your parents' bedroom. Rushed in there and said to them, where's Nanny, which is what we used to call her, where's Nanny sleeping? And my father said, don't be stupid, get back to bed. Poof. The next thing we knew, there was a tap on the door. The police had come to inform my mother that my grandmother was in a coma and wasn't expected to live very long. I could make it really romantic and say grandma, by the time my mother got there, she had passed. But no, my mother got there and she nursed her for some weeks, but she never regained consciousness, never. So I think that was my grandmother coming to say goodbye. And then, as I said, I was about 13, 14 when that happened. And then my life took on boys and looking good and not being bothered about anything. But occasionally my grandmother would come forward. But it seemed always to be a time when something awful was going to happen. Do you know what I mean? And I used to think, oh no, Grandma, I don't want it. I don't want this. I can remember her coming through. My sister was going to a wedding, and she had this beautiful blue and black suit. And my grandma, she said, what do you think I look like, my elder sister? And I said, oh, you look lovely. You look really nice. And I could hear my grandmother behind me saying, blue and black, she'll never come back. Like that. And I thought, oh my God, my favourite sister, Anne. And actually, she didn't die. She had the most awful car accident. But she never, ever came home again. She married the guy that was driving the car to the wedding. And she never actually came home, but it wasn't grandmother saying that she was going to pass, which is what I thought she was trying to say to me. Yeah.
So
then onwards and upwards, really.
So what are the downsides to having the ability? I mean, you can obviously see some kind of upsides to it, but there must be a dark edge to being able to hear things that might happen or people telling you things.
Well, exactly the bit about Anne, I was terrified. I thought, oh my God, she's going to die. She's going to die. And I was in a real state, Anne, begging her not to go. Don't go to the wedding, Anne. Don't go to the wedding. And she said, oh, don't be stupid. Everybody seemed to, pass off my ability as being stupid. And so you learn to keep this information to yourself.
Yeah.
Not everybody is willing, greeter of such messages, so and that's gone on throughout my life. I would just see or say something to people in passing, and sometimes they would just look at me as if I'd gone off my rocker. They totally, sometimes it was not nice. I would see things and hear things that were quite horrific to a young person. But I think that was part of the teaching. That was them sort of teaching me different aspects of what would be my mediumistic life.
I imagine it's also understanding what you're being told. Like you just said, you were told your sister wasn't coming home, but that doesn't mean she's going to die. So I suppose it's about interpreting what the information's given to you.
Absolutely, David. Yeah, absolutely. It's learning to interpret the different messages. It's like if I said to you, I can see someone behind you and I'm seeing my father. That doesn't mean to say that my father, but because I'm seeing my father's image behind you, perhaps you have a father or a grandfather that is wanting to communicate with you. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And I had to learn that craft. That's not something that you immediately know as a young woman.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus, Plus, also people think whenever you say that you've got two heads and there's something wrong with you. You know, you need to be put in an institution.
I mean, it's funny you say that. When you have this ability, do you ever second guess yourself? Am I actually hearing something, or am I wrong, or have you? It doesn't feel like that.
Absolutely, no, totally that. I insist that people do not tell me anything about themselves. They don't tell me about where I'm going, because you can imagine if I know a little bit about a place or a person, and then spirit actually interact with me and tell me that, then I don't know if it's in my subconscious mind or whether I'm actually hearing it. So I have to be really, really strict and say, look, I don't want any information at all. That way I can work knowing that what I'm getting is from spirit.
It must be hard though. Like when you go into it, sometimes if you go into a famous place, you must know about some of the buildings. You might not know, maybe the intricate things about the individuals in the building. But when you go into, say, a more famous haunted house, you must have preconceived notions of what you're going to find.
Absolutely. Yes, you do. And it interferes. It interferes with you. I can remember I did the York race course with Most Haunted. I was the psychic artist on that.
Yeah.
And, we were supposed to see Dick Turpin.
Yeah.
And all I got was a gentleman in a green uniform, obviously racing colours. That his name was Peter.
Yeah.
And he worked at this establishment, and I was trying to tell them that this is who was coming forward, that this Peter. And no, that's not any good. We don't want that. We just want you to see Dick Turpin and whatever is going on there. In the interval, I turned round to the lady behind me and I said to her, who's Peter? And she said, Peter's my uncle. He worked here for 20 years.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. I've developed a way of sort of trying to cut out what everybody else wants you to see and see what is in the underlying, what's underneath. There's true life stories underneath every situation. Whatever haunted house they take you to, there's always another side to the story. And I like that side.
You've been doing this a long time now. Do you still get enthusiastic about it?
Oh, I love it. The survival of the human spirit is what I am meant to do. I'm meant to do it. I can't believe that I was chosen at 3 to see and feel and hear spirit and then do nothing with it. There must have been a reason for them to do that.
You've been very fortunate to be able to get onto some of these really, really big TV shows because obviously your ability. How did that happen? How did you go from being a little girl that was seeing her granddad in his pajamas to being on national television, supposedly talking to Dick Turpin, or what wasn't Dick Turpin?
Really, really surreal. I was a bit disappointed with the politics in the spiritualist church. I was a platform medium for many years and did the southeast counties, travelled every Sunday with my best friend, Anne Watson, and we did a lot of church services. And I was a bit disgruntled with the way the way politics interfered with the natural process within the spiritualist church. So I decided that I was going to make one myself, not me alone, but with several different people. We managed to get our own little church going in Kempston in Bedfordshire. And I was running the circle at Kempston. And I thought, we're full up tonight. There's loads of people in here. This is good for the collection plate, keep the place going. And it was only afterwards that I was introduced to a film director, a producer of films. And at that time, he was producing a film called Phantom or Fraud. I won't mention his name because he might not like it, but he said to me, I I really like the way you come across. You come across quite normally, and you're not sort of hippie chick with beads and, the other sort of stuff. He said, I'd like to, to do a program with you. But he said, I'm telling you that if you're a fraud, I'll expose you. And I said, bring it on. It was my opportunity. It didn't even get televised. We did a piece at Chicksands Priory, and everything that I said there was verified by the historian at the time, but it never got aired. You know, these pilots sometimes just disappear into oblivion. And it was through that I did the Ghost Detectives. That was seen, and somebody liked what we were doing. The whole team, not just me, and they liked what we were doing. And they said, will you do this Ghost Detectives for Lion Television? And we did that, and that was me off and running. So, it was just chance, David. No, there was no manufacturing. I didn't sort of email thousands of people and sort of say I'm the greatest, because I don't feel I am. I'm just a normal lady.
It was thrust upon you as opposed to you seeking it out.
Absolutely, definitely.
So what are the, I mean, you've been on lots of programs, and I say one of my favorites is Northern Ireland's Greatest Haunts. How do you compare some of the programs you've been on? Like you say, Ghost Detectives, Most Haunted, Northern Ireland Greatest Haunts. How do they tend to compare in the way they operate? We're used to doing, say, paranormal investigations for ourselves, that we're not entertaining anyone. We're
yes.
going out there
doing it, for evidence.
For evidence. Whereas you're there trying to entertain, which is what it's about. What's the different approaches in some of the different programs you've been on?
I think, excuse me. I think when I worked on, Most Haunted, it was all about the Devil May Dare, all about really sort of trying to spook people and, and really get them interested in that way. When we did Ghost Detectives, it was, again, a bit about, oh, look, you're frightened or you're not frightened. When we did Northern Ireland's Greatest Haunts, it was a documentary. It was fact-finding. It was all about me and a historian, finding out if what I was saying was actually fact. And that was the most enlightening part.
It's also in the daytime. I remember that actually happened. You're not. There was parts that were in the green screen sort of way, but wandering around the houses and things like that, it's in the daylight. So there wasn't anything particularly scary about it.
No, absolutely, and we insisted on that. And one of my pet hates is that you've got to go around in the night time and you've got to go woo and get scared. Spirit are around us every day, every moment. Doesn't matter when you go to a haunted location, if it's 9 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If you have a haunting or a physical presence there, you should be able to feel it 24 hours a day. It doesn't mean that you have to go back at midnight. That's the scare tactics, and that's what really, really annoys me. It shouldn't have to be done in twilight, not at all. There is the witching hour, as you know, the time between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, when a lot of people pass to spirit then, but it's about relaxing into that time. And I think that's why people pass to spirit. It's sort of your body gets to a stage where it completely relaxes, and that's it. Pop off your pop, but you don't need to be there at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. My husband just passed me a message. Hang on.
Okay. What is that?
He said, I must mention to you Newcastle Keep, which was after one of the programs. I was invited to do Newcastle Keep, and it's a very haunted location.
I've been outside there. I've not been in it, but I've been outside there. Yeah.
Oh, well, if you've been outside, you will have felt it, David.
Okay.
It's he's full in the face. There was a pit on the way to the keep. And all I can say to you is, if you could see 20 people in the pit, their arms stretching up to the grid, which is over the top. And apparently, I didn't know at the time, I could just see their hands reaching up to me. But apparently, you know, they were placed in this place until their court case came up. People used to come and throw food down to them, the odd apple, the odd orange, that sort of thing. But I saw my first Roman soldier outside the keep, and I got my first unbelievable recording from the Newcastle keep. We went downstairs with a digital microphone or tape recorder, and I said, "Come on, Spirit, let's see what you're worth." You know, quite derogatory, I have to say. I'm not normally that way. And we went out, closed the door, and this great big booming voice said, "Who are you?" As if to say to me, "Who the hell do you think you are?" You know, it was amazing. It really was. We heard singing, we heard almost like, you know, the old fashioned singing where they, you know, what was it called? Chanting, you know, chanting voices. And then we heard the clock strike 3 o'clock in the morning. And it wasn't 3 o'clock quite. It was, we were listening to the tape, and then the clock struck 3 o'clock in our time. So what it made me believe is that somehow time has quickened. It's gone, you know, time has got faster, because we heard the clock strike 3 in their time, and then we heard it in our time.
Well, we're always changing the, you know, like Greenwich Mean Times and all these type of things over the years. May well have been 3 o'clock in that part of the country at that time.
Yes, absolutely. It was just amazing, like that they acknowledged me. Not just my grandparents, like they acknowledged me all the time, but this was somebody I didn't know who seemed a bit miffed that I was saying, "Come on," you know.
So obviously that doesn't always happen then. I mean, a lot of the times the spirits are sort of just going on their business, or
absolutely, getting on with it.
It's a bit like watching television almost, like just they're doing whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
Whereas these ones went.
I remember when we did Chicksands Priory, I was explaining that, there used to be a doorway here, because that's my job, that I tell them what I can see and what I can sense. And I said, there's a doorway here. And I could see this, like it must have been a servant of some kind walking towards me. And he walked straight towards me, and I thought, he's going to walk straight through me. You know, he's going to, we're going to have a moment. But he didn't. He sidestepped me and said, "Excuse me." So what the hell was I to him in his time?
Yeah.
It's scary, you know. What are we doing? Are we tapping into them, or are we tapping into their time? Are we like those, you know, what do they call them, UFOs, or you know, extraordinary people? Do they think that's what we are?
We're ghosts of the future to them. Maybe he saw you the way you saw him, and he's thinking, "Excuse me, you know," and go past you.
Yeah. So really, really surreal. But as one of my strangest experiences was on that particular time when a person in spirit actually acknowledged that I had a physical presence in their world. Okay. Yeah.
So we're almost out of time, but I'm just wondering what you might be up to. Once you get out of it, you're bored to tears at the moment. You're writing your autobiography, which we'll obviously all look forward to reading once it's finished. But what have you got any other television programs on the cards that you could speak about at the moment?
Well, I can't speak about them, but I'm working with a co-star on Northern Ireland's Greatest Haunts, Mark Cowden. Yep. You must, if you can, get an interview with him. He's very, very interesting. He's the one that invented the apparatus that we could hear spirit. Okay. All right. So you must try, and I recommend you, David.
I will try.
Yeah. He's just amazing. And we are working on a program that we are going to do together. Okay. But because of the lockdown, obviously we don't know when, where. We've done the pilot,
Oh,
So
okay. Well, that's something. That's
yeah,
more than just a pipe dream. Then, if you've actually done a pilot,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
have you? Just before we go, have you got any other than this new show? Is there anywhere you'd like to go investigate or go to that you've not been to before that is in your bucket list, as it were?
I would like to go to Australia.
Okay.
I in a dream. I know, and I'm not just saying that because you're
Yep.
here,
Yep.
but in a dream, I've been transported to. Well, I say transported, but in my thought,
Yep.
um, to some sort of pier or point in Australia where a lot of people died. I don't know if they were, it was in a time where they were incarcerated in this place,
Okay.
or whether it was during, the slave trade or whatever. But it has always, enthralled me that I keep having this repetitive dream that I'm in Australia. I also want to visit the rock where the girls disappeared. Do you know that story?
I do know that story, and it's not actually true. It was made up. So you could go
Well,
there,
I,
but
I
there's
would
no.
like to go there to see if it was true or not.
Okay,
You know,
it's called Hanging Rock. It's
uh,
out just outside of Melbourne. So I think when
yeah.
the girls became little old ladies, they admitted they made it up for the book.
Oh,
But
bless.
but but it is
But
a
that's
spook. It is a
that's
spooky place, though. It's
yeah.
a nice
Well,
place to
that's
go.
my role.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's go. Take me anywhere, and we'll tell you whether it's fake or fraud.
Yeah. Oh,
I love it. I love it. As I said, I'm a little old lady now. I've got to be very careful where I tread. But it enthralls me, and I love working with the phenomena. I really do. Once you see physical phenomena, you never forget it. You never forget it.
sure you don't. Well, thank you for that, Marion. That's been a wonderful conversation we've had, and I hope to do it again one day. And maybe after
Lovely, David.
when your autobiography comes out, we can talk
Lovely
about
to
a
speak
few
to
more
you.
things. Okay. All right. You take care. You and Ian take care,
Yeah,
and we'll
absolutely.
we'll talk to you later. Okay. Bye bye.
Lovely. Bless you. Bye bye, David. Bye.